Without a doubt, this year's NBA playoffs will be played under very unique circumstances. While the goal is still the same, teams will have to adjust their normal routines to adapt to this new NBA lifestyle. However, there are still no excuses, as these contenders must undergo the same hardships their counterparts do as well. With that being said, there are certain franchises who have a lot more riding on their postseason performance than others. Today we will look at 3 title contending teams that could potentially blow up their core if things don't go as planned. Number 3, the Boston Celtics. The Boston Celtics have to be one of the most interesting Eastern Conference contenders out there. Led by the young budding star Jason Tatum and star point guard Kemba Walker, the Celtics have a great mix of young and veteran talent. With one of the most talented starting fives and deepest benches in the league, the Celtics are a popular dark horse candidate to make a deep playoff run. These higher expectations, however, should come of no surprise for the Celtics team. For the past 3 seasons, many have picked the Celtics year in and year out to either become Eastern Conference champions or right in contention to do so. The Celtics have been making deep runs in the playoffs as they made the Eastern Conference Finals in both the 2016-17 and 17-18 seasons, losing to the Cavs both years. Last year, the Celtics made it to the second round where they lost to the Bucks in a 4-1 series. The Celtics have a very unique problem. For many years, they've had a lot of great talent and tradable assets as well. This unique circumstance has had the Celtics front office in a dilemma on whether or not to cash their plethora of talent for a superstar to build around. Year in and out, Danny Ainge and the Celtics managed to accumulate a pile of attractive draft picks and young talent on good contracts. The pressure was always on the Celtics front office to make a big splash, but the Celtics for the most part have always withheld from doing so. It was only a couple years ago when the Celtics traded their leading scorer Isaiah Thomas and other assets for who they thought to be their future superstar leader, Kyrie Irving. Fast forward to today, it is safe to say that trade was a disaster as Irving's presence arguably hurt the Celtics more than it helped. Not to mention, they also lost him in free agency for nothing. Danny Ainge and the Celtics have still yet to cash all their chips in at once. Before Anthony Davis committed to being traded to the Lakers, there was some talk about the Celtics potentially trading for Davis and pairing him with Kyrie, but that never came to fruition. It'll be quite interesting to see how Danny Ainge handles this offseason if the Celtics do disappoint yet again. Currently, the Celtics have the Grizzlies, Bucks, and their own first-round picks for the 2020 draft. The Grizzlies being top 6 protected and the Bucks top 7. Looking at the team's payroll, the only arguably bad contract they have would be of Hayward's, who is still recovering from a devastating injury. However, even he was starting to find his groove towards the end of this year's season. Obviously, the Celtics view Jason Tatum to be their untouchable. However, if the Celtics do have another year where they can't get over the hump, does Danny Ainge finally pull the trigger and package his draft picks with players such as Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, and maybe even Tatum for some bigger stars? At some point, these attractive assets do start to depreciate in value, so the clock on Ainge's tradable assets is starting to tick faster. Although Giannis and his camp deny the rumors, there is a slight possibility that Giannis would not re-sign in Milwaukee. If something like this does happen, would Ainge be willing to cash in for the likes of Giannis? Ultimately, the Celtics' performance in these playoffs will truly be telling of the franchise's future. Number 2, the Houston Rockets. James Harden and the Houston Rockets have a lot weighing on this year's playoff performance. For the first time in a while, the Rockets won't have the excuse of the overpowered Warriors for being the reason as to why they couldn't make the finals. While Harden himself has had abysmal playoff performances in high-stakes situations, it is safe to say that this team only goes as far as their best player Harden can take them. If the Rockets weren't already the epitome of modern-day basketball, they might as well be an exaggeration after the latest moves that GM Daryl Morey made this past season. After swapping Chris Paul for Russell Westbrook, Morey made even more moves. In a commitment to go all in small ball and accumulate as many 3-and-D players as possible, Morey gave up his star center Clint Capella for the ultimate 3-and-D guy, Robert Covington. He then also signed similar type players Jeff Green and DeMar Carroll. If this season, just like the past seasons, comes with disappointment, the pressure will really be on for Morey to do something. Dating back to 2014-15, the Rockets have been losing to mainly the Warriors in their deep playoff runs. James Harden is unquestionably one of the greatest scorers in the game's history, but at some point, Morey must admit that this style of play is unsuccessful for winning championship basketball. An underreported aspect of this matter is that the relationship between Morey and the owner Tillman Fertitta is not the best. Morey was never Fertitta's guy, as he was given the job by the old Rockets owner. To make matters worse, Morey's comments on the Hong Kong protest lost the Rockets a lot of potential revenue for the foreseeable future. The point is, could Morey, out of fear of losing his job, finally give up on his own philosophies and blow up the foundation of the team? The Rockets have a lot of expiring contracts, but the two most important contracts are of their stars, Russell Westbrook and James Harden, who are slated to be paid until 2022-23. There's already been some rumors circulating that Morey would most likely be forced to break up the duo via trade if this team underperforms. The problem is, Westbrook is on the downswing of his career and is projected to make $40 million in each of his final 3 years of the contract. There aren't many teams who would be willing to take that type of money. James Harden, who has a very similar contract, is a much more attractive trade since he is younger and also better. Would Morey be willing to trade his ace? Seeing Harden on a different team would be a very weird feeling, but it is possible that the Rockets finally give up on this style of basketball and change the direction of their franchise. Only time will tell, but it is most likely that if one of the two stars were to leave Houston, that it would be Russell Westbrook and not James Harden. Number 1. The Philadelphia 76ers. The process. Former Sixers GM Sam Hinkie had dreams of these title contending days when he tanked consecutive seasons away. Led by their young stars Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, the Sixers are one of the few franchises that have the potential to be a dominating franchise for the years to come if everything goes as planned. Unfortunately for the Sixers, they were one bad bounce away from potentially making the Eastern Conference Finals and maybe even the Finals last season. Since taking the GM spot, former Sixers Elton Brand has not been shy of making big moves. He first made his presence be known when he traded for the star wing Tobias Harris during the 2019 trade deadline to complement Simmons and Embiid with some outside scoring. Brand did not stop there, as he was still not satisfied with the starting lineup. In part of a 4-team trade last offseason, Brand acquired the former Heat 2 guard Josh Richardson, a young scrappy guard with great athleticism. Brand wasn't done yet, as his final big move was to sign the veteran star forward Al Horford and steal him from the rival Celtics. Many thought that Brand's main motivation for this signing was to simply steal the Celtics' only chance at guarding Embiid. What came of more surprise was the fact that Brand gave such a player this late in his career $97 million over 4 years. To make matters worse, Horford started coming off the bench towards the latter part of this season. Prior to Horford coming off the bench, the Sixers were playing with one of the lengthiest and defensively stout starting lineups in the NBA. The Sixers ended up finishing 6th in overall defensive rating, so it can't be said that paying for all that height didn't end up helping. However, the struggle for the team came on the opposite end of the floor. With this many options, it was very hard for any of these stars to truly develop any rhythm and emerge as the go-to leader. Embiid was supposed to be the de facto offensive leader, but his role on the offense is very unorthodox. Instead of having Embiid play most of his possessions down low on the block where he has a considerable advantage against most NBA players, the Sixers love using him in pick and roll and pick and pop scenarios, as well as isolation plays in the mid-range. Part of the issue at hand is the spacing. With Horford, Simmons, and Harris all on the court at the same time, there's just so much mass on the court, making it hard for players such as Embiid to operate in the paint. Not to mention, Simmons' lack of outside shooting gives opponents the ability to pack the paint even more. With Embiid getting injured yet again this season and Simmons suffering a potentially season-ending back injury, many fans thought this season was a wash. However, thanks to the break, this team is back healthy and ready to make a deep playoff run, and there are no excuses this time. The bottom line is, Brand arguably made 2 questionable offseason moves. Trading and extending Tobias Harris, who seems to have been underperforming as he tends to get lost in the shuffle, and overpaying for the old Al Horford, who is now coming off the bench so they can stagger his and Embiid's minutes. Also, Brand has 2 young potential superstars, Embiid and Simmons, whose games do not suit each other. There is no question that this team is loaded with talent, but does the talent gel is the real question at hand. If the Sixers disappoint yet again, will Brand decide to break up this young core and possibly ship either Simmons or Embiid? Personally, I believe no matter what happens this season, apart from winning a title, Brand should fire the head coach Brett Brown, as he is shown to be incapable of handling these personalities as well as properly constructing an offensive game plan that is beneficial to the entire team. Luckily for Brand, Embiid and Simmons are still quite young, so they will still have a lot of value even after next season. At the same time, Harris and Embiid are in their prime, which you don't want to waste at all. The clock is ticking, but Brand should not worry about having to make a panic decision. It all ultimately comes down to whether Brand believes that Simmons and Embiid can coexist on the same team and win a ring. As always, let me know what you guys think. Which of these three teams are most likely to trade their entire core or part of it if things don't go as planned?